Hello, Camp Pros. This is Olive Gregan, Summer and Family Camps Director at YMCA Camp Jewel.
And I'm Matt Hansberger, and I'm the executive producer of podcasting at Go Camp Pro, and you are tuned in to First Class Counselors.
This series is for the camp directors to give to their counselors as they hire and prepare them for the upcoming summer.
That's right, because as we say every time on this show, the camp counselors are the key to success at camp. If they do their job well and they are making those great impressions with campers, then the campers are going to want to come back year after year. So camp counselors, they have the most important job, and that's why we're here.
Yep, we're here to cover one specific topic and cover the essentials as fast as we can.
It's the need to knows,
They can't go without,
the fundamentals,
the basics. So Matt, the topic we're going to talk about today is not just a topic we came up with out of thin air. Tell us a little bit about why we picked what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, sometimes we come up with good topics all on our own, but it's nice that we get some emails from time to time with some suggestions of what camp directors or what camp counselors want to be learning more about, and this was one of those. So I'm going to read you the email. I'll be a little cryptic about it. I'll read you the email that we got. So this said, "Hi, First Class Counselors. I am a senior staff at my camp, and I run the counselor and training program. I have a suggestion for a topic that I would find helpful on First Class Counselors: setting boundaries with older campers. I'd love to hear anything you guys have to say about working with older campers and teens, because I've definitely noticed some of my coworkers struggling with this and setting boundaries with campers and counselors. I joined staff later than most at the age of 24, so I can't really speak from experience when I tell an 18-year-old staff member why they can't talk about certain things with a 16-year-old staff member. What do we do when we're setting those boundaries, and how can we help our staff make good decisions?"
Yeah, and it's a great topic, and we're really excited to talk about it today. So when we're talking about teens, there's a lot of different things we want to cover. So first off is, what are the different programs that teens are a part of at their camp, and why do those programs exist? Across the board, we have so many different options that parents and campers choose from. It's important to know why they might be choosing those topics. The importance of boundaries, just like our writer asked us about, we're going to talk about that and how to work with older campers. How do you speak with them? How do you act around them? What you can do to be a better role model with these teenagers. Also, but we want to talk about some of the challenges that come with teens and some of the positives, and what comes after teen leadership. There's a lot that goes into what these kids' experience are going to be when they're here at camp and what happens after. Almost the whole point of the program is about preparing them sometimes for what comes after. So as you're here looking to work with teams, what are some things that you can do to make sure that you're better suited when you become a teen counselor? So the first thing we want to talk about today are those programs, though. So we have a kind of a running list, and we'll go through them really quickly, and then Matt's going to talk about why some of these programs are kind of important for teens, or why they're offered in general. So going through, we have trips. So that would be actually leaving camp and maybe going somewhere far away. It might be a little bit more comfortable and going to another camp and checking that camp out. It might be going camping for an extended period of time. There's a lot of different types of trips out there. Another version of a trip is also a service trip. So this might be you're going somewhere to serve and help the community that you're going to be a part of, which is another great way. We also have outdoor educational trips. You might be going somewhere to learn something about that area. For example, you might be, this is a cool one, traveling to the Galapagos and learning about the wildlife there. You never know. These places can go far and wide, close, but it's just a learning experience. On a lot of camps, there's things like leaders and training programs where they're focused on leadership. Another close substitute for that might be the counselors and training program, learning how to be a counselor. And then there's also a staff and training program, which is, exactly what it sounds like. How are we going to prepare these kids to be staff one day? So that's really important as well. All three of those, some camps have different ways of defining them, we say, but each one kind of has its own house as well that you can kind of focus on as well. Some kids are just coming back to camp to do regular old camp. They want to come back to a traditional overnight camp at 15, 16, 17 years old and just enjoy camp for what it traditionally has always been. Some fun, some games, and seeing old friends. Some kids who are in their teens are now going to go to a sports camp. This might be more focused on a sport that they care about playing, and it might be 1 to 2 weeks of just playing basketball or just playing football or field hockey, whatever the sport might be. So there's a lot of different options out there for teens. Sometimes they're also trying to go to a college prep camp or a computer camp. So just like there's a lot of different camps offered, there's a lot of different ways that teens can enrich themselves and have a great summer. So Matt's going to talk to us a little bit about why our campers might choose some of these options and what goes into that choice.
Yeah, I think that if you look at the kinds of things that we mentioned in these trips, especially like that leader in training, counselor in training, staff in training trips, a lot of those things highlight on the themes of wanting responsibility and wanting to step up to take on more challenges and test their skills. And I think that that's really important to note. When we get into talking about like the challenges of working with teens, it's important that we remember why they're there. And it's because they want to be a leader. Maybe they've had a counselor in the past that's really had a great impression on them, and they want to start being like them, right? So they've had a good role model, and they want to maybe translate that into becoming a staff member or a teacher someday. And working at camp is like the most applicable experience ever. And I think what's also good to remember is, especially if you have teens who have been longtime campers, they're there for the same reason that every other camper is there. They have this built up love of camp, and they want to continue where they've left off. Maybe they've made friends and made close connections. Or maybe if some of those campers were anything like me as a teenager, maybe camp was that safe space for them. And maybe that's where they came to feel popular or feel like they're part of a crowd, or, you know, get away from the crap of high school, or maybe what's going on at home or social media. So maybe camp is that like safe haven for them. And as they get older, I think we should be honored that they've chosen camp still, when a lot of their friends maybe think that they're too cool for camp, or that they've gone off and gotten jobs as teenagers. But if they're still coming to camp as a teen camper, I think that's absolutely amazing. And we should honor that and think of that as a positive before we think of the challenges.
Okay. Yeah, so we're going to start off with some of the awesome parts of working with teens. Why is it so cool to be in that area of camp? So to start off, for me, they can just take care of themselves. If you're a teen leadership counselor in some way, or a teen counselor, your campers know how to wake up, take a shower, eat, change their clothes daily, take care of themselves in the basics, right? Sometimes they might need a reminder, or sometimes they might start to smell, especially if you're with maybe some younger teens, like 13 and 14-year-olds. But at the end of the day, they're much more autonomous than, say, your 7 or 8-year-olds who are coming to camp for the first time. These teens might still experience some level of missing home, but they're also probably going to be able to acknowledge it and be able to take care of it. Another benefit of working with teens is you can learn from them more than just introspectively, right? Working with teens is a great way to learn something from somebody who also is having had life experiences. You know, at 15, 16, they've done things in their lives that you probably haven't done in yours, which is weird to think when you're 5, 6 years older than them at times. But they do have things that they can teach you. They might know how to play guitar or know how to speak another language at that age. So they actually have someone to offer you that's more than just like oh, well, I work at camp and I'm doing a good thing. And sometimes the kids teach me more than I teach them. Introspective learning. They actually have cool things that they can teach you how to do. And then finally, for me, one of the awesome parts about working teens is they sometimes, as CITs or as leaders at camp, they start to make a difference. And because you're one of those people who is role modeling and mentoring them at that time, you're one of the people who is helping assist in that difference-making skill that they're building. So you know, at the end of the day, when they leave summer camp, you may have helped someone become a better person, who therefore will go out and make other people better people or enrich the lives of others. So that fulfillment that you have working with teens is one that really can't be, you know, disregarded. It's just an amazing feeling. And it's one of the big reasons why I still work in camp, because I had that experience working with teens and I didn't want to leave camp after it. Matt, what are some of the awesome things that you know that come from working with teens?
Yeah, I like what you said, that you can learn from them. And I think that's so applicable because they're older now, and you can have some pretty fully formed conversations with them about camp, about leadership and life. And yeah, we'll talk about setting boundaries and where you need to kind of steer clear from, but they can also argue their opinion. So if they have a thought about something, you can tease that out and you can be like, well, why do you think that? Or tell me more about that. And you can actually have some pretty fulfilling conversations where you will take away maybe a new perspective or a new opinion from it as well. So I like it that you said that about learning from them, Oliver. I think that's really smart. What I liked about working with teens is that I could be a little more like casual in my approach to how I was speaking with them. I remember like I love playing games with teens because I could be a little bit more competitive. And a lot of them, you know, like they were faster than me, so I could run full tilt against them. And you know, that helped me. And then while I was playing that game, I always kept in mind that, you know, I was the staff member, so I couldn't, you know, get super uber competitive and get rude with them, but I could also like egg them on a little bit and have fun in that way to help them be, all in the goal of helping them be engaged with the program, because they're a teenager. They don't have to be treated like a young camper anymore who you have to let beat you at Gag-a-ball. But if you're going to beat someone at Gag-a-ball, you got to be the role model of how to win with grace, that kind of thing. The other thing I would say is that they're the future of camp. And how cool is that you get to have that like last impression on them as the type of staff member that they could be someday, or the type of person working with kids. And I don't think I can overemphasize how much kids need that compassion and need a strong role model in their lives. I think I could say these days, but I think any day, I think there's tons of outside influences telling kids and telling us that we need to make money, we need to rise to the top, we need to be better than everybody else. But to teach them the value of compassion and the value of community, I think that's such an amazing gift. And it sticks with teens more, I think, than it does with younger kids. So that's why I love it. So and I think, and I'm glad that we're covering why it's great before we cover our readers and emailers questions about setting boundaries, because it's tough, but let's remember that it's super positive too.
Yeah. Swinging into that, let's talk a little bit about that difficult part of working with teens. Sometimes make it a little bit more challenging for us to work with somebody who may be closer to age than us, as closer to age with us, or also, you know, has the ability to think independently on their own. So I'll kick it off and say the first thing that happens with teens is they're not going to play for mind games. You're not really going to be able to distract them with a fun game. You're not going to really entertain them or distract them from what their feelings are. They completely are cognizant of what's going on all the time. So understand that distracting them is going to be a little bit more challenging and has to also be real. You're not going to be able to send them on a secret mission somewhere, or give them a special task, or give them a new game to play, or let them be first in line. Sometimes you can do something that's similar to that. For example, sometimes you might be able to give them a leadership opportunity and have them step up to the plate, because maybe the issue they have at that current time was that they didn't feel like they were being trusted, that they were capable enough, and they just needed someone to be there for them. I'm giving advice when I'm supposed to be holding back on it. Sorry, it's a natural thing. The next thing is these teens do have life experiences, like I said before, and in some cases that does make them smarter than you, or at least they have experience in something you don't have. So you have to be understanding of that sometimes your campers are going to know things you aren't going to know. I find this, and although my separation isn't as little as it once was, like with social media and the internet and memes and things moving so quickly, even my staff, who are maybe a year or two younger than me in some cases, know way more about what's going on the internet than I do. I am just starting to understand what TikTok is. So that's kind of where I am. But I have staff who know almost every single major TikTok human being there is. So that's really important to know. They're going to have different life experiences than you. They're going to be smarter than you in some areas. You got to understand that. And sometimes that's just a really good excuse to say, tell me more, teach me. The age difference. So a lot of the times you're working with teens, they might be really close to you in age, and you're going to have to make sure that you're focused on knowing that and that you're still a role model for them. And you have to act a different way because of that. We'll go into this in more detail in a little bit, but because of that difference and because of that spot that you have to stick to as a role model, it's really tricky to make sure you don't cross that line to someone who may look very similar to your friends because their age is so close to yours. So you have to make sure you do keep track of what that line would look like. A lot of the times when you're working with teens, they're in a transition from camper to whatever their next step might be. So that transition is really hard, where they can't just focus on the fun, but they need to focus on the learning or the leadership that they're trying to get into the program. And then finally, there's some more serious issues that happen with teens that I know about. Working with teens, there's going to be discussions about sex. There's going to be discussions about drugs, alcohol, body image, peer pressure, suicide, self-harm. These are all different things that when I was a teen leadership counselor, that all came up while I was in that position. It's really important. We'll talk about it in a bit, about following policies and making sure you're there for your campers and how to speak properly about these things with them. But it's really important that you realize at these times that you are the person who they are coming to with these, or you are the person who is on that first line of hearing about it and can be there to help them. So we'll talk about how to play it in a bit, but understand that that might be an issue that comes up with when you are a counselor with teens. Matt, what are some difficult things that come up when you've been working with teens?
Yeah, I think that a lot of this stems from the fact that, especially when you're working with, so the person who emailed us said, how do we help 18-year-olds work with 16-year-olds? I think a big part of it is, like, outside of camp, if you weren't working at camp, there'd be no reason why you wouldn't be friends with them. So I think that, like, keeping that in mind, what's hard is that you've signed up to work at camp, right? So you've kind of sacrificed that. Like, you can't be their best friend with them in that way. You can't have all those conversations that would go outside of the norms or the rules of camp. And even more so, just like socially, it can be really easy to fall into the realm of wanting them to like you versus wanting them to have a great experience at camp. And we can still have them have a great experience at camp and have it not be about you. If they walk away having a great experience about camp and they think that you're a super awesome counselor, that's great. But if they just think that you were the quote unquote cool counselor, and because you let them get away with stuff and that kind of thing, then you're not giving them the best camp experience and setting them up for success at camp in the future. And also with working with teens, it's hard because you can't just tell them what to do. You're an authority, but you are also their camp counselor. And when teens see that there's other hierarchy things going on, there's like maybe an assistant director or a unit head and a director, they recognize that, there isn't real recourse for not listening to you. If they don't want to listen to you, they won't. So you have to kind of be on your game. And it's not about playing mind games, because you're right, Oliver, they won't fall for that. But I think that, it's about role modeling, enthusiasm, and trying to find experiences that you can do with them that get them to do it. I don't want to give away, because I think we're gonna get into some practical stuff. But I think it all comes back to role modeling and being authentic with them and following your procedures. I guess it's like that. It's like a triad of, like, are you role modeling? Are you being your true self? And are you being authentic, and are you following camp's rules? And I think if you fall under all those three things, I think you're golden. So I think we're going to get into some practical stuff, but maybe those three things are how I'll frame my advice coming up.
All right. So the first practical skill we're going to talking about is talking. How can you have these conversations with teens, and what do those boundaries really look like when you're having these conversations? I'm going to start with the tough one, which is just appropriate speech and how to talk. Now, every camp is going to have its own policies. I'm going to talk you kind of through what it would be like to be in the difficult conversations. So how you might go about if someone wants to talk to you about sex or drugs or alcohol. How do you kind of gear into that conversation? So the first thing I say is check out your camp policy. If they say don't talk about sex, don't talk about drugs, just don't talk about it. A really easy way to do that is if a camper starts to bring that up in conversation, you say something along the lines of, hey, that's not a conversation I can have, or hey, look, that's not appropriate here at camp. You could say something along the lines of, why do you want to talk about that? Because you may not be able to talk about the specific thing, but you might be able to talk to the camper about why they're feeling that way or why they need to feel to bring that up, right? And that can be an appropriate conversation because, it may not have to deal with specifically what's going on. It might just have to deal with what's going on with them. So that's another good way to do it. Some camps will maybe give you a little bit more leniency on how to talk about that. I don't think there's probably a lot of camps out there that are going to say, talk about your sex life with your campers. So that's kind of a no-no right off the bat.
Yeah, don't do that. Let's be clear.
Yeah. I know that would probably have some serious repercussions for any staff member who we found out was doing that. So
Yeah.
please take our advice on that one. Try to stay away from there.
No, stay away from there. Don't do it. There's not many hard and fast things that we're going to say on this podcast, but for gosh sakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe your campers do want to talk to you about the fact that like all of their friends are having sex and they're not keeping up. Like that's not about the sex. That's about the peer pressure of what's going on in their lives. So really think about what the heart of the issue is. And this could be the same with drugs or alcohol, right? And you know, maybe they've had an experience in their life where they're a teen now and a friend has offered them drugs or a friend has offered them alcohol and they know they're not supposed to do it, but it's an experience they've had and they're teenagers. They don't know what to do yet. They don't know, and they're looking for answers. You're still allowed to be a mentor here, right? You probably can't give them a specific answer, right? Like you probably shouldn't say, oh yeah, everyone should try something at least once in their lives. Probably not the right answer to give to a camper, but you can ask them how do they feel about, you know, when their friend offered them alcohol or how did they feel when they were offered drugs. And I think that another important thing here is making sure that you know that this conversation is probably not going to stay between just you and the camper. This is probably something that you're going to be bringing up to your camp director afterwards and say like, hey, I just want you to know I had a conversation with this teen camper and they have had drugs in their life where they've been offered alcohol or they are sexually active, so that you're aware, your camp director is aware, and if your camp policy is necessary to make the parents aware of what might be going on in that camper's life. So it's really important to note that these things do sometimes fall under mandatory reporter, which here in the United States is basically saying these are topics that need to be passed on to somebody else because they're warning signs of something that could be, you know, progressively worse for that camper and could jeopardize their safety. So note if those things do come out, make sure you are going to go and talk to somebody about it and make sure the camper knows that it doesn't stay between you and them. Have that conversation with them, maybe even before they begin to talk and say, hey, I just want to make sure you know that a lot of the times I might have to be mandatory reporter and talk about this with somebody else. But please make sure you're still there for the camper. Make sure you are still listening to them. And also make sure it's the right setting. I know I didn't go into that too much, but if this is an entire cabin, that might not be right because every teenager might be at a different stage in life. And if you're trying to have a camp discussion and somebody's bringing up one of these things, it might be a time for you to say, hey, hold on, that's something that we need to talk about at another time, in maybe a more private setting. So be aware of those things. It's a very difficult and very hard conversation to talk about, but make sure that you're not just canceling it on the camper because they might be wondering about some more things in their life. I'm going to pass over to Matt and we'll kind of go back and forth. I just talked for a lot and want to make sure I don't take up everything.
No, I think you're saying important things, so I appreciate you doing that. But I think I think sometimes we're like scared that a teen camper is just like gonna like confront us and talk about all these like really hard topics and things. But I think there's a couple things. I'll give you maybe two things and then turn it back to you, Oliver. I would say one, know the difference when a camper is looking for attention, and know also when it might be a harder conversation. And if you get a sense that they're just looking for attention, then use some like redirecting tactics, or you can give them attention in a constructive way. So sometimes, asking them to explain what they mean, or like, what do you mean by that? Or like, can you tell me more about that? They might just be like, oh, and awkward because they were just looking for the spotlight in that. But then, if it's serious, I think it's fair to say like, hey, that's a little concerning. Is this something that like you're concerned about or you're worried about? Because maybe we can go talk to the camp director about it. And then you're expressing your concern about it, and you're starting to maybe you don't mention the camp director. Maybe you mention your unit head to keep it a little closer. But I think kind of following up along those lines, I would say just don't get caught up in their drama. There's enough issues with drama and camp staff that we navigate through every year as camp directors, but teen campers are going to have that as well. And that could be because of hormones. It could be because of social pressure. The worst thing you can do is to be like a source of gossip or even a recipient of that gossip. And so if, a teen camper comes up to you and says, hey, I heard that this person and this person are making out, and you'd be like, well, okay, well, let's let them deal with that. And I'm not going to, I don't really want to talk about that. Can we talk about something else? And then redirect that conversation. Because you need to remember that as a counselor, you have your own friends, right? Your coworkers are your camp friends. And the more you show you're interested in those kinds of conversations, the more that you're going to perpetuate that it's being okay, right? So if you role model and redirect the conversation to something that is appropriate, what they're excited for about camp, what they want to do for free choice tomorrow, then you're not getting into that drama, and you're not also kind of like affirming that it's okay to be talking about those things. And I'll just give you one more before I go back to you, Oliver. I think in general with teens, it's less about teaching them directly and like showing them how to be a good person by like, we don't want to be condescending. I think teens really will notice when you're A, not being authentic, or B, being condescending to them and treating them like they're a little kid, right? Remember that they're back at camp because they want to take on more leadership. So we want to treat them with that respect. And part of that is through your authenticity and being a good role model, right? So if it's not in your personality, you don't have to be that like obnoxious, bubbly person about cleaning the cabin. You can have a real conversation, be like, hey, you know what? I get it that this is kind of gross, but we all live in community. We're all going to do this together. So, like, suck it up, folks. Let's do it together. Those kinds of conversations are okay to have, in my opinion, at least. I think, again, going to like asking them why or explaining what they mean. The metaphor that I thought of is think of yourself as like a really good talk show host, right? If you look at James Corden or Jimmy Fallon, they do a really great job at like putting the spotlight on their guest, and being like funny and collegial with them. But the talk show host still has a job to make sure the show's timing works and that they're getting on to the next segment and that things are staying appropriate for the censors, right? And if you think of yourself in that aspect, I think that might help you reframe that, like where to put the spotlight and how to redirect and how to move things forward when you need to. Oliver, can I turn it back to you?
Yeah, of course. I'll never stop talking. Yeah, so we started off with a little bit more of that really directly inappropriate conversation, which I think is a big fear for a lot of staff. The one inappropriate conversation that I think gets caught a lot, but not a lot of people think about right off the bat, is the appropriate conversation about fellow staff, camp as a whole, and other campers, especially for these staff in training or counselors in training or these leaders at camp who are trying to become leaders. How do you talk about camp in a positive way, especially on those long days in summer where you're like, man, I'm super, super tired. And you don't catch yourself doing it all the time until afterwards, where you realize, oh man, I just talked really poorly about this staff member who, maybe in the back of your head, you're not thinking is a great staff member, but still it doesn't help that staff member when you just put doubt in the heads of all of your campers, right? So you do need to make sure that when you're talking about fellow staff and campers, it's in a positive sense, right? If you have a CIT or a teen who comes up to you and says something along the lines of, why did they hire that staff member? Or why does camp do pancake on Saturdays and not on Sundays? Or why does camp, like, why hasn't camp sent that camper home yet? Or why hasn't camp done anything to help that camper in some way? Like, your job as a counselor is to say, all right, cool, let's do something about it. Or, it's okay, that's not part of our business, or that's something that we're going to work on now, or whatever it might be that you need to say in that situation. I just gave a lot of different examples, so it's hard to give specific words to say to them, but it's important that you stay positive and that you really truly think about, all right, cool, the image that I'm painting of staff, camp, and campers is the image that this camper is going to take away, or this teen is going to take away from me. So I need to make sure that they see camp in this positive light. A lot of people talk about how that second year camp is popping a bubble, or that first year you become a staff member pops that bubble of how wonderful camp is. Your job as working with these teens is to show them that that bubble is real. It can be real. There's a reason why that bubble has existed. It's because the staff who are role modeling right there and then are the ones who are keeping that bubble there so that the kids can live in it and enjoy it and really have a good time. So it's now talking to those campers about making the bubble and making this great camp place possible. So don't talk poorly about others in camp. Talk positively, talk about how you can make things better and what you're going to do so. Or how you can help another person, how can you help that camper have a better experience? How can you, really enjoy those pancakes on a Saturday instead of a Sunday? And how can you make sure that that staff member who looks like they'd be struggling, that teen understands why they're struggling? Maybe that counselor had a really tough day the night before with a camper who threw up in their cabin in the middle of the night and they had to clean it up. And that's why they look super tired as a lifeguard, right? Maybe something happened. You need to think about how to best enrich your teens so that they understand the positivity of camp. Sorry, that's a long one, but yeah, appropriate speech. Don't get caught up in talking negative about things that are going on at camp with your teens because it paints a negative image. Matt, go.
Yeah, no, I think that's huge. Again, role modeling, right? It really all does come down to that. I have another tip for you about if a hard conversation comes up or something's going on. I think that you can lean on your camps and community values to help you out of those conversations. So 3 things to help you do this. 1, it's good to know what your off-limit topics are in the first place, and setting that early with campers in a cabin contract. Cabin contracts are just as important with teens. And just so we all know what a cabin contract is, it's usually on the first day. I usually frame it like I get kids to write down, like, what do you want to do this week? And then they brainstorm cool ideas. And they say, okay, like, what do we need to do to make sure we can always do those fun things? And then I frame the conversation of how do we need to treat each other? What do we need to do? And then every camper, we write those down on a big piece of paper or construction paper, and then every camper signs it. And that's our like behavior contract for each other that week. So, setting up your values within that contract is a great thing to go back to and be like, hey, we really shouldn't be talking about that because that's not in our values of building each other up. Or at camp, we had the 4 S's at a lot of the camps that I worked at. And one of those was, does it build mine or others' self-esteem? And you can be like, well, I really don't think that when we talk about someone like this, it builds their self-esteem. So, I think we should talk about something else. And then the big one here is reminding teens that they are an example for the younger campers. I think that is like my go-to card, is reminding them that the camp experience is more than just about them, that we want to make sure that the 6-year-old camper who's seeing them do things is getting that good impression for the future as well. So I think that's one. And the other one, I think the last one that I would say is, if you mess up, fess up. I will go on the record and say that by total accident, I swore in front of my campers when I was a counselor. I think I got like hit in the head with a ball, and I think I said the poop word, but not poop word. And what I took from that situation was that, like, what I should have said right in that moment, I should be like, you know what, hey, that's not okay that I said that. I was just frustrated that I got hit. I think I was more awkward about that as a 16, 18-year-old staff. But I think if you make that mistake, calling yourself out and checking yourself is a great way to show that, you hold yourself to the same standard that you would hold them to. Do you have anything else, Oliver, for some practical tips?
Yeah, I think I got 2 more. The first one that I'm going to say is when we're upset at campers, especially teens, it's really easy for us to use a couple of lines. Some of my favorites are, you are supposed to be a leader now. What a line that is. It's just absolute guilt. Or going the other route of, like, I'm so disappointed in you. Because you're a mentor, and they're going to take that disappointment pretty to heart if they truly believe in you and they know what they did was wrong. We use those a lot, and although I think growing up in the household that I grew up with, my mom loved using guilt as a way to make sure that we were doing the right things. But it's also important because when you say those types of things, teens are going to get a better understanding of what they did wrong because they know they affected somebody else. Mm-hmm. They weren't what they expected they were supposed to be. And it is important sometimes for those teens to realize that, as hard as it might be to say to them. The biggest thing that I do say is getting angry at a teen is maybe the least effective way you can do it. So if you're doing this intentionally to hurt them instead of being a leader for them, they're going to know that. They're going to get angry at you because you're not being authentic with them. They know that you're using this as a ploy, and they're going to become more rebellious. I've seen this in a circumstance where an entire, we call them our village of CITs, just rebelled as a whole because they were so upset that they weren't being taken seriously and they thought they were being treated like kids. And then when we were angry and we didn't operate correctly. Every camp director has to admit that they were wrong at some point. We were definitely wrong at this point. We were calling them out for their actions when we should have paused, taken some time, walked into the room that we had all the teens in there and be, all right, a mistake has been made. We've made it as a whole because we're supposed to be your mentors and you're supposed to be future leaders. These are things that happen. Let's start working on how we're going to solve it for tomorrow, right? That is such a better approach because you're showing your teens that you're not going to guilt them. You're not going to yell at them. You're not going to make them feel guilty and all these things. You're going to stop, be patient with them, and role model how to properly solve their problems. And it doesn't stop there. It starts with solving the problems instead of just being angry or mad about what's going on. So that's really important for moving forward. Something that's a little bit off topic, but still has to do with the communication that you have with campers. And another point that I'm making right here is just social media in general. You are probably younger than Matt and I. If you're not, it's okay. We're going to catch you up a little bit. But with social media, it is really easy for you to have your profile and leave it open. I highly suggest to you as a counselor, when summer camp hits, you make your profile private in whatever way that social media does so that only certain people have access to it. It's fine, even if you are posting on your social media things that are totally appropriate and are heartwarming and great and kind, it's still your personal life. And because of you providing that personal life to people, it's really awkward if a 10-year-old camper comes up to you and asks you about your personal life. It's super weird when a teenager comes up to you and says, oh, I saw you had a lot of pictures with Meredith. Are you and Meredith dating? No, you and Meredith are just really good friends and you like to do that. But it stops that conversation from happening in the first place. A lot of counselors today will have a second account or a Finsta or another Facebook or whatever it might be that has a different name and it's more for their personal use. It's a great way to be able to be yourself on social media, but also note that sometimes campers can still find you. I know of a specific staff who one counselor had a Finsta and their camper really liked them. So they found them on Finsta. And because that Finsta was friends with all the other staff, the entire Finsta world of that camp got blown up by this one camper. And then it was all ruined for them on their personal, what they believed was going to be a secret society of just these camp people. So just know it's not always safe. It's not always foolproof if you slightly change your name. So just be wary of that when you're going into the world of social media. As somebody who's probably younger than myself or Matt, you probably know more about the internet than we do, but that's our advice as a camp director. You still have to be careful. You still have to be wary about who might be able to find you and what you might have on the internet. It's the same old verbiage that you've probably heard your entire life. So just be careful about what's going on and follow the policy your camp has, like we say all the time. Cool.
I think I'll follow up on that quickly with, it's also about thinking about what example that you're setting for yourself and for your camp. You represent, I think I've been on my soapbox a ton of times about this. You represent your camp. And whether you're private or not, what kind of impression are you setting to parents and campers out there about who you are and who the type of people your camp hire, right? If I'm a boss and I'm looking up people on Instagram that are applying to staff, and I have the right to do that. I totally can. And I see that your profile is open and it's full of stuff that, you know, like maybe you're drinking it, and maybe you're above 21 in the States or above 18, above 19 in Canada. But like, I still want the parents and the kids to be seeing that you are an awesome person 100% of the time. So it'll help you keep your job. And I think it's also good because it'll help camp out set a good impression of who their staff are.
All right, we're going to talk briefly about setting them up for the next step. So a lot of your campers who are coming to this program are trying to do something after it, right? They're trying to get some type of enrichment from camp and then move on with it. So this is my slight soapbox for a lot of people because it's really important to me and it's the foundation of what I look at when I look at teens. And teens who are going to be coming back and working for camp. And to understand this, these teens are the future of the camp you love. They're the future of all camps in general. They're going to set the standard for what our society and what our culture is going to be. If you have been to camp, you know that we want to represent the best of all of the good that is in the world. We want to talk about honesty, respect, responsibility, and caring. We want to talk about the 4 S's. We churn out people from camp who are going to make the world a better place. Case closed in that goal, right? It is up to you who's working with these teens who are right on the precipice of making that change to make sure that you are teaching and role modeling your best, and that you're not going to cut corners or condone poor results, and make sure and just do things that aren't right when it comes to by these teenagers. It's the detriment of a great future because they're going to have to build on the broken ground you're leaving. You're preparing them to be a better you. This doesn't mean you stress them with unattainable expectations, but it does mean that you hold them to the values of your camp, that you're a good person, and you follow the rules and standards so that you can show them that you're trying to be better every day and that they can one day be better than you. Soapbox ended. Please, please, just put that on repeat 100 times. It's so important. But Matt, please take it away. I'll get off the soapbox.
I need to find some like royalty-free music to edit over top of that, because that was brilliant. I love it. Because you are building on the broken ground. I love it. I love it. I think that's great. I think it's really empowering. I'll kind of jump up and say something that I think is really important too, is just tell kids that they're awesome. Tell teens when they do something awesome, you point to them and you say, yes, that is amazing. And I think we should mean it too. We should be real with them. Don't lie to them and tell them that they're awesome when they just were okay when they were leaving that program. But if they're great and they're awesome and you think that they are going to be a leader or a difference maker in the world, it's our job to tell them that. And a life can be changed. Travis, if you know Travis Allison, who runs the Camp Hacker podcast, Go Camp Pro, he has a great TED Talk that talks about the power of small moments and one caring adult in a kid's life, and how Travis's life was changed when his counselor brought him outside of the cabin one night and said, hey, Travis, I think you're going to be a really great staff member someday. And that completely altered the course of his life. So when you see kids who are going to aspire to greatness, you should tell them that. We had a great, I was at a Christian camp most recently, and he came for like a Vespers with the staff, and he said it really great. That Oliver's inspirational speech made me think of this. He said that it's our job as caring people to take a kid and reach inside of them and come out and grab you like, hey, this is what I noticed about you. And you show it to them right in front of their face. And you say, this is why you're amazing. You are great. Because they might not hear that anywhere else in the world. So I think it's really important that we are empowering them to be better people. And by pointing out that, hey, you're great. You're going to be great. I want to help you be the best you can be. And that can be a great way to reframe any sort of like conversation where they're falling short of the camp rules or policies or anything like that. So just tell them they're awesome.
There you go. All right. And then if you're looking to be a counselor with teens, or you're going to be a counselor with teens, here are some things that we want you to make sure you're thinking about. Note your age. You know, some camps do require a specific age. I know my camp specifically says that you should be 21 if you're going to be working with campers in our teen leadership areas. So that's an important thing. Note your age. Know that it is important. That's a requirement. Just know that camp experience sometimes isn't enough. Get out there into the world when you're not at summer camp and find a way to be involved with teens or with kids in a way outside of camp, so you can come back with an experience to give back to those teens and to camp as a whole. And then typically understand that a lot of these jobs with teens do require some more skills. It might be a certification like mental health first aid or wilderness first aid or archery, or you might need to know some other skills on camp like how to canoe or how to do archery. Having those skills is really beneficial for these programs, but also sometimes necessary. So know you might have to go out of your way to be better at some of the skills necessary to be in those teen leadership programs. Matt, what are some other things that you need to think about if you're going to be working with teens or you're looking for that job?
Yeah, I would say just get some experience. right? At a local, maybe youth shelter or teen center. I know there's a couple in the city that I live. Volunteer with coaching sports or teaching swimming lessons. Any kind of experience that you can get with working with kids is good, but if you can gear that toward teens, which is why I think about like local sports. Local hockey is crazy in St. Thomas, Ontario, and I know that there's a lot of teens in high school, grade 11 and 12, that are doing volunteer coaching on the side. So they're working with teens every single day. I think when it comes to camp, just look for opportunities to work with the with teens, even if you're not their counselor. So maybe running programs with them or being a station leader during a game. And then talking to senior staff about their experiences, what was hard, what was rewarding, that kind of stuff. Because you got to practice. You can't just assume you're going to be good with working with teens, or else you're going to be like me and you're going to swear by accident and not know what to say. So the more experience you can get, the more tactfully you can navigate those challenging conversations.
Awesome. As you may well know, Matt and I like to talk so much, and sometimes we don't even talk about everything we wanted to talk about. So if you take a look at our show notes, you're going to see there's actually a list of programs that are really cool to run with your teen leadership program or your teens in general. It's stuff that's focused on teens, so you can go and take a look at that in our show notes.
And you can find those show notes over at camphacker.tv/podcast.
All right, it's time to get ready, which means you're getting ready for summer camp. So, Matt, what is something that a counselor can do right now to start getting ready for summer, which is getting pretty close?
Yeah, we're getting there. I think that this can be done on a periodic basis, but just taking a look at what social media you do have, and just like, I call it a social media audit, that you're, looking like, am I following people that are giving me joy, that are setting me up to be a good person? What type of person am I putting myself out there in the world to be? So, some people will say that they have like their camp self. They're, like, I feel like I'm my best when I'm at camp, and I have my camp self. But if your camp self is who you love, then just be your camp self all the time, right? And so look at what's influencing you and what are you putting out there. And I would say, even if it's a Finsta account, you're still saying something about yourself on that Finsta account. So, why are you posting those things? What's the underlying message about it? And if you're happy with that, then great. And if you're not, then make a change.
All right. My get ready started off as one thing and became another thing, so I'm just going to give you two today. So extra special bonus get ready. If you're sitting there wondering about if you should go back to camp, and it's this time of the year, which might be February when we're recording this, but if you hear it another time, it doesn't matter. This makes sense whether it's December or November for many camps. But if you don't know if you want to go back to the camp, apply. Even if you don't know. The reason being is because myself as a camp director am going to fill positions, and then I'm going to have disappointed staff who aren't going to be coming back, because even when they apply, the first thing I'm going to be sending them is, I'm sorry, everything's been filled. And it's the unfortunate truth that you may have waited just too long. So if you are on the fence, put your name in the pool at the very least. If it's not in the pool, you don't get to play. So that's really important. And then finally, my other one that I came up with during the show is reach out to the people who may be losing camp in their lives, right? So if you're listening to this, you probably have a camp that is your home camp, right? I think a lot of our listeners are camp people. And if you're not a camp person yet, you're becoming one, which is great. But there's a lot of people who may come for a summer or 2 or 3, and then they continue on with their lives and may be separating from the tide of camp. Shoot them a message. Find a way to get them back to camp. The age-old joke is, oh yeah, I'm going to come and visit. No, actually plan that visit. Actually find a way to get back to camp and reminisce about some of those things. Or if it's not camp, find a spot to meet in the middle and have lunch. But don't let camp people get too far away from the boat, or you might lose them. So send out that lifeline and get them back into a place that they probably loved a lot and are just now coming up with excuses for why they can't come back. Be the excuse for why they can. That's my second get ready. So
that's good. That's good.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for tuning into the show today. If you want to get a hold of myself, you can reach out to me on Facebook. It's just my name, Oliver Gregan. And if you want to send me a nice formal email, you can always send it to oliver.gregan@ghymca.org. I'll answer your questions and I'll give you hope for camp this summer or whatever you're looking for. I'm there. So Matt, how can we get a hold of you?
Yeah, for sure. You can reach out to me at Matt, M-A-T-T, at gocamp.pro. You can find me at Iskis on Instagram. I've had some listeners, I think, follow me on Instagram, which is fun. My wedding photos are going up there right now, and they're only 6 months late. But so that's exciting. But I also wanted to take a second and thank our lovely listener who inspired this topic. We didn't want to mention you by name just because if that's something your staff are struggling with, we don't want to call you out on that one. But if you as a counselor are struggling with something or have a question about something, or if you're a camp director listening to this, we would love to make these episodes as specific as we can to help you. That's why we're doing this podcast in the first place, because we believe that camp counselors should all have these skills to be the best they can be. So thank you for you doing that, for sending that out. And thanks for those of you who have given us feedback. I really appreciate it. And we'll do our best to send you something personal every time you email us. So that's either Matt at gocamp.pro or oliver.gregan@ghymca.org.
Yep. And if you do enjoy what we're doing with our show, please, we'd be so grateful you just left us a review wherever you are listening to this podcast. Your ratings and reviews not only help us know what you like, but they also let us know what you want to hear more of. So boost our ratings, go and like our posts, and more people can discover the amazing stuff that we're doing at this show.
Yeah, I would also say you should, over the next little bit, we are going to be moving to our own podcast platform. So we have been gracious that Travis has included us in the Camp Hacker news feed or the Camp Hacker podcast feed for a while, but we're going to move over to our own place pretty soon. So make sure you're tuning into the Go Camp Pro Instagram, as well as the website camphacker.tv/podcast, so that you know when we're going to be switching. Because there'll be a time in the next couple of episodes, it might even be before the end of this season, that we're going to be not in the Camp Hacker feed anymore. So just stay tuned to that. And you can do that by going to camphacker.tv/podcast, and you'll see our show notes from our podcast and the Camp Hacker podcast and some more things that are going on with Go Camp Pro.
Thanks for listening, friends. And remember, camp is camp and camp's all good.